In this part, I will be going over how to make a domestic violence rapid housing referral for clients who don't have a valid unexpired housing voucher or shopping letter. On the landing page for the section that asks if your client has a valid unexpired housing voucher or shopping letter, just select no. The client doesn't, and we will take you to the referral form appropriate for making this kind of referral. Same process as before. This window requires that you get consent from the client. Before continuing with the domestic violence rapid housing referral form, please ensure your client has reviewed and signed the domestic violence rapid housing referral and prioritization consent form, indicating that they understand and accept the terms and conditions outlined in it. And as you see, the form is available in different languages: English, Spanish, Russian, Arabic, etc. If meeting with the client remotely, a signed digital copy is acceptable as well. You can check this once you have the consent by checking this box. I attest that the applicant has signed the domestic violence rapid housing referral and prioritization consent form, and that my agency has retained a copy for its records. Next, similar to the other referral form for voucher holders, you also have to put a client's CAP survey here and their rapid housing referral form number. And this image shows you the section of CAPS where you can find this information. As you see, this is where you can find the rapid housing referral form number. After you've completed the second part of the application, you'll see the number, and this is the CAP survey number, which you put here. Your information goes here: your last name, first name, your email address, the agency through which you're referring the client. For our purposes, I'll just put Brooklyn Family Justice Center. Click next. So this part asks which option best describes your client. And as you see, there are 3 different options here, such as starting with, my client had a housing voucher or shopping letter, but now it's expired. My client applied for a housing voucher or shopping letter and is awaiting for a response. My client does not have a voucher or shopping letter, is not awaiting for a response. And you will see the importance of this in the next few windows. So to start, I'll just make a selection of the third one, which is my client does not have a voucher or shopping letter and is not awaiting a response from any subsidy application. Click next. Before proceeding with the DVRH referral form, it's important to assess whether your client may be eligible for other housing programs that could better meet their needs. Click next to review this information. We will now provide information about housing programs for which your client may be eligible. Please answering the following questions to proceed. And this is why the new DVRH referral form is different, in that it really emphasizes that DVRH programs do provide shorter rental assistance than voucher programs do. And for DVRH programs, it's up to 24 months of rental assistance, whereas for FEPS, for example, it's 5 years of assistance. It really emphasizes that if the client is eligible for a housing voucher, to explore that route first. And if the client is not sure if they're eligible for a voucher, this section may be helpful for the client and even the advocate. So as you see, is your client currently staying in a shelter? Yes or no? So for our example, we'll select yes, and I'll explain later why. What type of shelter is your client currently staying in? DHS, HRA, other. I'll just choose DHS. Please choose your client's household composition. I'll choose family with children. So there is 1 adult over 18 and there's 1 child under 18. And this is what I mean. This is the next window that will pop up, which depends on the selections that you made in the previous window. It starts with review the client's eligibility for the following housing programs by clicking the tabs below. Please keep in mind you can check the client's potential eligibility for FEPS A, FEPS B, City FEPS, and supportive housing in their CAP survey results. The system uses the information you've entered to determine which programs they qualified for. The information provided below is not comprehensive and does not cover all programs. There is an option for you to reach out to the coordinated entry team, and there is the email, which is coordinatedentry@ngbv.nyc.gov, for more information about housing resources in New York City. However, this part is useful in the sense that it doesn't only show potential eligibility for housing programs that the client may potentially be eligible for based on the answers that they have given in the previous section, but it also describes the requirement qualification that each housing program has. And as you see, there is the description and requirement for FEPS B, City FEPS, supportive housing, Section 8. Let's say the client is, after reading this, the client is eligible for FEPS B. The next question asks, select all housing programs your client appears to be eligible for. If you're unsure, choose not sure. Let's choose FEPS B. So this is the window that you will see next. Instructs. Take a moment to discuss with your client how this referral could affect their eligibility for other housing options. It might be best to get a housing voucher or shopping letter first. A housing voucher or shopping letter significantly increases your client's likelihood of securing safe permanent housing. You can fill out the DVRH referral form once your client has secured a voucher or shopping letter for a high likelihood of being selected for DVRH. And bolded in red, which is something that I mentioned earlier, if you continue to refer your client to DVRH without a voucher or shopping letter, even though they're eligible for one, their likelihood of being selected is very low. In the rare event that they are selected and receive rental assistance through DVRH, they will likely lose eligibility for other longer-term housing assistance, such as housing voucher or shopping letter, especially if it is related to fleeing domestic violence and or homelessness or housing status. And a lot of the housing vouchers and programs in New York City do have that requirement. Please remember that DVRH offers limited support of up to 24 months of rent, while housing voucher or shopping letters can typically provide longer-term rental assistance. And if they do go forward with DVRH, they're going to lose that eligibility for other housing programs. So then the question is, would your client like to exit this form or continue with the DVRH referral? So the client has an option to exit the form and see those other housing resources that they are potentially eligible for. Or the client, it states, my client understands the implication and wants to continue with the DVRH referral without a housing voucher or shopping letter despite being eligible for one. That's what we'll choose just for our example. Next. Before continuing with the referral, you must read the following information out loud to your client. You will see a few statements per page or the next 3 pages. In the next 3 pages, it's going to be very instructive. There's going to be instructions for you to read out loud statements to your client, and there's going to be parts where you have to take time to read to yourself. Next, you see it's written read out loud, and this entire statement has to be read out loud to the client. The Domestic Violence Rapid Housing Program, known as DVRH, can provide rental assistance covering up to 24 months of rent. The program can also help you find housing on the open market. Please note that because program spaces are very limited, most clients who are referred to this program are not selected. I recognize the urgency of your situation and your right to be safe, to safe, stable housing, and we should continue to explore other housing options. Next, another statement to fully read out to the client. Only the information you provide in this form will be used to make program selection decisions. Information from other applications, including demographic details such as race, gender, will not be used. You will likely find out about the outcome of the DVRH selection process within 2 months. If you're selected, securing safe housing can take anywhere from 2 to 6 additional months. If there are immediate threats to your safety, we should work together to secure immediate support, even if temporary. Next, another important statement to fully read out loud to the client. This form is designed solely for housing-related purposes. You only need to answer what is asked. I will not share anything we discuss while completing this form without your permission, unless you're at risk of harming yourself or others. Additionally, if a parent abuses, harms, or puts their children at serious risk of harm, I am required to report it. Some questions may feel challenging or uncomfortable. We can take a break at any time, and you always have the option to decline to answer. You might also notice that some questions are repeated from our previous conversations. This is to ensure we have the most accurate information. If you have any concerns about privacy or how your information will be used, please let me know and I can provide more detail. As you see, these statements that you are required to read out loud to your client are not only informative about the DVRH referral process and program offerings, but it is also helpful for you as a mandated reporter to read out loud to the client that they only need to answer what is asked and that you will not share anything that you discuss while completing this form without their permission, unless they're at risk of harming themselves or others. And it also has some trauma-informed language where it says that the client can take a break at any time, and they always have the option to decline to answer. This section, as you see, there is no read out loud instruction. This is for you to read. You're about to begin 2 sections focused on your client's circumstances, risk of severe harm, and barriers to securing safe housing. There are the guidelines for completing these sections. If you already know the answers to the question, confirm it with the client to ensure accuracy. If you're unsure or don't have the information, ask the client directly. Use trauma-informed language and non-judgmental language. Only ask for necessary details. Avoid probing deeper than required. Respect the client's comfort level and boundaries at all times. And then there is the terminology that is used in the form that's defined for you. First one is person causing harm, otherwise known as PCH, which is defined as any individual who is using violence, exerting control, or engaging in other abusive behavior towards the client. This could be an intimate partner, a family member, or any other person in the client's life. And then weapon is defined as any object with the intent to cause harm. Weapons include knives, firearms, or other dangerous objects such as blunt instruments, sharp tools, or items used to inflict injury, such as bats, bottles, heavy household objects. Click next. And this is where you start the first section, titled the Risk of Severe Harm section. As it states, this section involves discussing experience of violence and abuse. Please approach these questions with sensitivity and care. There is some emergency numbers that are listed for you here and highlighted in red. If a client is in immediate danger, call or text New York City's 24-hour HOPE hotline, and there is a number for the HOPE hotline for shelter information, or contact the Home Plus program in your borough for a pendant alarm system. And of course, in an emergency, call 911 and let the client know that calling 911 does involve the police. Please ask your client each of the following questions. In the questions, you will see that there is he, she, they, which refers to the person causing harm. If you already know the PCH's or person causing harm's pronouns, please use those when reading the questions out loud to the client. For example, to start with the first question, if you already know that the PCH is a he and the client let you know, you can ask, has he ever used a weapon against you or threatened you with a weapon? And similarly, if the client let you know that the PCH is a she, has she ever used a weapon against you or threatened you with a weapon? And the questions that are asked here are part of the risk of severe harm assessment. First question, are read, and the client has an option to answer yes, no, or they decline to answer. And based on what the client says, that's the selection that you make. Next, has he, she, they threatened to kill you or a member of your family? Next, do you think he, she, they might try to kill you? Next, has she, they ever tried to choke you? You have the option to click yes, no, or decline to answer for each. For today's example, we'll just put yes to all. These next parts are further questions as it relates to risk of severe harm. For example, I won't read all the questions, but some of the questions. So, does he, she, they have a gun, or can he, she, they get one easily? Yes, no, or decline to answer. Similarly, is he, she, they unemployed? Has he, she, they ever tried to kill himself, herself, themselves? Use the appropriate pronouns. Do you have a child that he, she, they knows is his, hers, theirs? Does he, she, they follow or spy on you or leave threatening messages? And again, read all of these out loud to the client and choose what they have answered. For today's example, I'll just make my selections, but I will also show you what happens if you leave a question unanswered. So let's leave the last question unanswered and click next. This is the pop-up that you will see. So one or more required questions were left unanswered. It's important that you answer each and every question in all sections of the DVRH referral, because if you don't, then you're not able to move on to the next window. So let's select yes. Next. It's also important to note that if your client wants to go back to change their answer or their answers to the questions in the previous screen, they are able to while you are in the process of filling out the application. So there is the back option, and you can go back and change the answer. However, it's also important to note that this option is only available while the application has not been submitted yet, because once the application is submitted, there isn't an option for you to go back and edit the answers. You're only able to do that before the application has been submitted. This section is not multiple choice. It says please select all that apply to your client. You need to read out loud all these 5 statements and select what the client says applies to them. It doesn't have to be one. You can select more than one if the client says that more than one applies to them. I won't read all, but for example, PCH has violated an order of protection. Client has reported violence to law enforcement with no consequences. Client is facing or fears facing rejection or isolation from their support network. And again, all these questions and statements are related to the assessment of risk of severe harm of the client's domestic violence situation. So let's select those. Next. Please provide the estimated month of the client's last domestic violence incident to the best of their knowledge. DV incidents include physical harm, stalking, verbal abuse, and other forms of abuse. And there is an option for you to select the date, different years. And since it's the best to their knowledge, you don't have to select the exact date. Let's select January 2025, and this is what will pop up. Next. And this is the final window for the risk of severe harm section, but it is not the final window of the entire application. You're still on page 17 of 22. It instructs you to next thank the client and ask for a moment. It gives you an example of something that you could say, such as, thank you so much for sharing that information with me. Please give me a moment to pull all this together, and we'll move on to the next section. Use this time to read the summary of your client's circumstances and use the information to answer the 2 additional questions below, including your assessment of the client's risk of severe harm. This blue window or box gives you a summary of all the selections that you have made, client's answers, And this part is useful to answer the next two questions that you will see. If you believe that the questions didn't capture a part of the client's domestic violence situation as it relates to risk of severe harm, and you want to include it, there is an option that asks, have any circumstances that increase your client's risk of severe harm been left out or not yet included elsewhere in this form? And there is an option for you to select yes or no. If you select yes, there will be a text box that will pop up that allows you to describe those additional circumstances that increase your client's risk of severe harm and that were not included in the form so far. But there is an important warning to not include any personal identifying information, and that includes name, address, or date of birth, or any details that could reveal your client's identity. Avoid including sensitive legal or medical information that could compromise your client's privacy safety. And this is really, really, really important to emphasize. Please do not use a text box to enter that personally identifying information and that sensitive legal or medical information. And for name, that includes first name or last name. Let's select no for today's purposes. And this part, it says, using your judgment, please choose a statement that best describes the client's circumstances. This part is not for you to read out loud to the client. As stated earlier, this client is for you to make your selection based on the assessment that you have made of the client's domestic violence situation and their risk of severe harm as the answers that they have given you from those questions asked in the referral form. And you have an option to select history of DV, but no known risk of severe harm, low risk of severe harm, moderate risk of severe harm, escalation possible, high risk of severe harm, escalating danger, extreme risk of severe harm, urgent intervention needed. And each section has an example of what that selection means. For example, the highest one is extreme risk of severe harm, urgent intervention needed. For today's example, we'll use that, but the example for that is that the client requires urgent intervention to prevent severe harm or death from DV. I'll select that. And also important to note that the selection team trusts the advocates to make their assessments of the client's risk of severe harm from knowing the client's DV history and from using the answers to the question asked in the risk of severe harm section. So click next. This is the next part, which is barriers to securing safe housing section. This section explores challenges your client may face in securing and maintaining safe housing. These questions may touch on sensitive topics, including financial instability, past evictions, or discrimination. And highlighted in red, it says if your client is experiencing urgent housing needs, or make sure to also assist the client in identifying immediate support options. The following questions ask about your client's household income. Please clarify for them that this household does not include the person causing harm. So when answering questions about their income or if they receive public benefits or cash assistance, please make sure to emphasize to them that this does not include the person causing harm. Does your client or anyone in their household receive any of the following cash-based public assistance benefits? Select all that apply, and there are options for no one in the household receives any cash-based public assistance, TANF, or commonly known as cash assistance, SSI, or other cash-based public assistance. For today, we'll select TANF, otherwise known as cash assistance. And next it asks, what is your client's total monthly household income before taxes? And that income includes income from employment and any cash-based public assistance, but it does not include any in-kind benefits such as SNAP or WIC. Let's select 1,000 for today. And then next, you'll need to read a list of statements out loud and ask your client which one best describes their financial situation. And there is a recommended script that you can ask the client. and I'll read the script for today's purposes. Next, I'm going to ask you about your financial situation, including your ability to pay rent if you covered your essential non-housing needs. By essential non-housing needs, I mean things you might need for your day-to-day life that aren't related to housing. Things like food, medicine, hygiene products, transportation, childcare, and phone bills. If you're ready, I'll read 5 statements. Please tell me which one best describes your current situation. And then you have to read these following 5 statements out loud and ask the client which statement best describes their financial situation. So, for example, if I first covered my essential non-housing needs, I could still pay rent. If I first covered my essential non-housing needs, I could pay only a part of the rent. If I first covered my essential non-housing needs, I couldn't pay any of the rent. For today, I'm not reading all of them, but do make sure to read all of these to the client and select what they believe applies to them. For today, I'll select I'm not able to cover my essential non-housing needs, even if I don't spend anything on housing. Then click next. Please select all that apply to your client. Also read all of these out loud to client and select what applies. It could be more than one. I won't read out all of them, but do read out all of them to the client. Client has less than high school education. Client is subjected to unpaid, underpaid, or forced labor. Client is unable to work or maintain employment, for example, due to pregnancy, caregiving duties, disabilities, physical or mental health conditions, or other circumstances. So select what applies. And like these selections are made to clients' barriers to securing safe housing situation. Further selections, please select all that apply. Read these 2 out loud to the client and select what applies. The client's household requires a specific type of housing, such as accessibility features that is difficult to obtain in the housing market. Client has an open child protective services in New York City, known as ACS, or adult protective services case that is impacting their ability to secure housing. This is what we'll select for today. Further, please select all that apply to your client. Again, these selections relate to barriers to securing safe housing. Client has a history of evictions. Client is not proficient in English. I'm not reading all of these out loud, but do read all of these out loud to the client. So, client is not proficient in English. Client has a history of evictions. And then, furthermore, please select all that apply to your client. Client has faced discrimination seeking housing based on factors such as, but not limited to, race, sexual orientation, religious affiliation, or national origin. Client is having trouble getting into a shelter because of their personal or family circumstances, including but not limited to having a male child over age 13, being a single person household, or having a pet. And this is what's important. And new the RRH referral form questions, they really incorporate questions as related and connected and emphasized with equity. For example, this selection says client has faced discrimination when seeking housing based on factors such as but not limited to race, sexual orientation, religious affiliation, or national origin. If the client has faced discrimination because of whether they're a woman or they're a person of color, this assessment is included when making the assessment of barriers to securing safe housing. For today's purpose, we'll select that. Click next. And this is the final window for the barriers to securing safe housing section. So similarly, it asks you to thank the client and ask for a moment. Gives you an example sentence to say, "Thank you so much for sharing that information with me. Please give me a moment to pull all this together and submit your referral." And then it says to use this time to read the summary of the client's circumstances and use the information to answer the 2 additional questions that you'll see below, including your assessment of the client's barriers to securing safe housing without access to DV-RRH. So this blue box has a summary of the selections that you have made that you can review. And as you see, there is a question next that asks if any that impact your client's ability to secure safe housing been left out or not yet included elsewhere in this form. If you believe that the questions left out something that is relevant to the client's barriers to secure safe housing assessment, you can select yes, and a text box appears where you can describe additional circumstances that impact your client's ability to secure safe housing and that weren't included elsewhere in the form. But again, really important to emphasize to not include any personally identifying information. That includes the client's first name or last name, address or date of birth, or any details that could reveal your client's identity. Avoid also including sensitive legal information or medical information that could compromise your client's privacy or safety. This is really, really important. So for today, we'll select no. Now, given your client's barriers and resources, how difficult would it be for them to secure safe housing without support from domestic violence rapid rehousing? So there are selections from somewhat difficult to secure safe housing without DVRH, moderately difficult to secure safe housing without DVRH, very difficult to secure safe housing without DVRH, extremely difficult to secure safe housing without DVRH. There are 4 selections that you have to make, and you have to select one. And to help you, there are examples given for each selection. For example, for very difficult to secure safe housing without DVRH, there is, for example, the client has very limited alternative resources or faces substantial barriers that would be difficult to overcome without DVRH. And for today's example, we'll use extremely difficult to secure safe housing without DVRH. And the example for that is the client has little to no alternative resources or their barriers are so severe that securing safe housing without assistance is virtually impossible. And now you can submit the DVRH referral form. And this is the window that will pop up that says the DVRH referral form was submitted successfully. Please ask the client if they have an email address to send them a confirmation. And also let them know that the email will also include an opportunity to complete a brief feedback form for $10 as a digital thank you. And there is a link here to provide their preferred email address. And if they are a Spanish speaker or they prefer to receive the email in Spanish, there's also the option here as well. And here's the link. And then it also shares what to expect next from this referral. So 1, you will receive a confirmation email shortly. 2, you and your client will be notified of their selection status within 2 months. If you haven't heard back in 2 months, please reach out to coordinated entry at ngbv.nyc.gov, and that is the coordinated entry email. If your client's circumstances change, you may submit a DVRH referral update, and there is the link to that here within 6 months of their original referral. If it's been more than 6 months since you've made the referral, a new referral is required. Please refer to the confirmation email for further details, or you can contact the coordinated entry team, which is us, and our email is listed here, coordinated entry at ngbv.nyc.gov, for further assistance. And that's it.